Welcome back to Washington Watch. My name is Joseph Backholm, sitting in for Tony today. So glad that you are with us. Yesterday, the Subcommittee on Health of the House Committee on Energy and Commerce held a virtual hearing on fiscal 2022 budget, and during the hearing, HHS Secretary Xavier Becerra was repeatedly asked questions about the Partial Birth Abortion Ban Act. The reason he was probed on this multiple times was because he initially denied the existence of the law and then sidestepped questions about whether he would enforce it.
Partial birth abortions are prohibited right now under current statute, and that is something that you recognize, correct, Mr. Secretary?
Congressman, as I said, I recognize that the law provides women with reproductive rights, and that the Roe v. Wade decision made very clear under what circumstances women can exercise those rights. I will do everything I can to make sure we comply with precedent and the law when it comes to protecting a woman's right to her reproductive health.
And that does include enforcing this statute, correct?
I will make sure that we are providing women with the protections they need on their reproductive rights.
With me now to actually give us some answers on this question is one of the members of that committee who asked some of these questions, Congressman John Joyce. Congressman, welcome back to the program.
Joseph, it's great to be with you and to address this very important issue.
Well, tell us from your perspective, when you were part of this dialogue and heard the Secretary's responses, what was your reaction?
Secretary Becerra flat out refused to acknowledge that partial birth abortion is prohibited under federal law. I'm a doctor, Joseph. I know what partial birth abortion is. It's literally prohibited by name in statute. Quote, partial birth abortions prohibited. And this confirms, Joseph, what we feared all along, that under Joe Biden's leadership, that the government officials are going to refuse to follow the law of the land.
Now, tell us a little bit about when the history of the partial birth abortion ban, because you're right, it is in law. It's odd that he would deny that. Where did it come from?
The origins of it are codified in statute. It's Section 1531 of Title 18. My background is as a doctor, and I understand the sanctity of human life. Secretary Becerra is an attorney who has a long history of working in the government and should certainly be aware of that statute and the fact that we had to turn it around and talk to him and identify it, that it's codified as a statute by name in law right now. I understand that the dignity of life is a fundamental truth. It's guaranteed by our Constitution. And I wanted to hear where Secretary Becerra was going to land on this. And unfortunately, it's what we all suspected, that the Biden administration is a pro-abortion administration that will not follow the statute of the land.
Well, Secretary Becerra's nomination process was one of the most hotly contested and one of the most opposed, though he was ultimately confirmed. But one of the things that came up in the conversation in the committee was the suggestion that he made that partial birth abortion isn't actually a thing that the medical profession recognizes, therefore it can't really be banned and regulated. What's your response to that?
It's what I responded to him during the hearing, Joseph, that I'm a physician and all people in medicine understand what a partial birth abortion is. I think he dodged the real issue. I think he showed truly that he was a pro-abortion arm of the current administration, and he wasn't willing to follow the law.
Now tell us, is this an issue where he is expected to be defending this law? How did this come up in the course of the conversation?
Because it's part of the fabric of what is guaranteed by any administrator in Biden's cabinet. And he should be keenly familiar with what these laws state. And the fact that he initially chose to say, I don't recall or I don't know what this law is. And then when we turned around and said, look, this is Section 1531 of Title 18 of the U.S. Code, he pivoted and talked about protecting women's access to health care. That wasn't what the question was. The question that I posed to the Secretary of HHS is, would you acknowledge that partial birth abortions are prohibited under law? And he would not acknowledge that. It didn't surprise us, but I'll tell you, Joseph, it gravely disappoints me that the Biden administration puts into positions of leadership individuals, attorneys, who will not follow the statute, which are in the U.S. Code.
Why do you think he went to such lengths to deny or ignore the fact that this statute exists? Why is it such a sensitive issue for him?
Yeah, I can't speak for him, but I'll tell you what I see. I see the Democrats continuing to reverse the progress that was made under President Trump's leadership. The most pro-life president that we've had. The president, when we marched for life here in Washington, D.C., the first president to come and address the pro-life people who were there. I can't imagine how anyone couldn't understand that these are basic tenets guaranteed by our Constitution. President Trump did. He advocated for the pro-life agenda. And what we're seeing, and what I am so concerned about, is that President Biden is actively working to reverse the pro-life agenda that was successfully achieved by President Trump in his administration.
Do you think that his discomfort with partial birth abortions in particular has to do with how vulnerable the abortion industry is because of that position, where defending partial birth abortion really makes them, even in the public's mind, there's lots of data that suggests the public is not generally supportive of partial birth abortion. Do you think that has anything to do with why he simply dodged the issue and tried not to answer the questions?
I think that the Democrats are even refusing to address what we in the House of Representatives have brought up in the last Congress and brought up again, the Born Alive Abortion Survivors Protection Act. And that ensures that babies who are born alive after a botched abortion that receive basic medical care. And yet Nancy Pelosi doesn't allow that to come to a vote. Joseph, this shouldn't even be a question. And yet Speaker Pelosi and the Democrats refuse to bring life-saving legislation to the House floor. In the House, we're continuing to gather support for this discharge petition, and you need to hear about this. I want everyone to look this up. Do your internet search about the Born Alive Abortion Survivors Protection Act. It's a discharge petition that is signed by every member of the Republican Party. It's something that we're advocating for, and it needs to be addressed. We continue to move this forward and ask Speaker Pelosi to address this life-saving legislation.
We are at a hard break. I got to let you go, but really appreciate your advocacy for life, and we look forward to talking to you soon. We'll get back to this